Good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming out today. I've been looking forward to meeting you and to sharing some information and answering questions. As you saw in the brochures that were the flyers that advertised this, we're going to talk about your forks and your furniture. And what in the world does that have to do with health? So we'll talk a little bit about that. But before I get started, let me tell you a little bit about myself. So my name is David Wright. I'm an internist, and I actually trained here in Memphis at the Baptist Hospital. You remember the big 19-story hospital downtown? Well, that's where I did my residency. Came here from Florida, and as you can tell, we decided to stay. Finished my residency back in 1982. Then I spent 3 years in the Air Force and was stationed in Blytheville, Arkansas, and then came back to Memphis to set up practice. And I've been in practice in one form or another since 1985 here in Memphis. So this is home for my wife and I and our 4 children and 11 of our 13 grandchildren. We don't have any great-grandchildren yet. I met Mr. Irby, who has a shirt on about being a great-granddad. Hope to see that one of these days. But that's some of my background and how I got to Memphis. And what I've found over the course of my career is that helping people understand what choices they have that can either help their health or hurt their health was one of the most important things I did. I used to think it was knowing which prescription to give my patients, and that's important. Or what test to order, and that's important. But when it comes to health, we need to go beyond that, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So this isn't meant to be just a lecture. So I am going to ask some questions. And so I hope some of you will feel bold enough to throw out some answers. So the first question I want to ask is, what matters to you? When it comes to your life, what matters to you? What are some things that are important to you? Somebody yell it out. Or health. Okay. What else? Food. What else? Exercise. Why is health important to you? And that may sound like a silly question, but why is it important to you? Feel good, be able to do things. To continue your age. I love it. Any other reasons why health is so important to you? It beats the alternative. I like that. How many of us enjoy spending time in the hospital? Show of hands. Wait a minute. You don't enjoy that? Yeah, it's not a very nice place to have to go. But if you have to be there, we're glad they're around. But to stay out of the hospital and to have great grandchildren to spend time with and grandchildren and the friends that you have here. So those are what matters. I had a nurse teach me how to ask questions better in my career. And she said, you know, Dr. Wright, you're taught to ask people, what's the matter with you? Right? And that's what your doctor says. How are you? What's wrong today? How can I help you? She said, the better question is, what matters to you? What's important to you in your life? And then once we understand what counts to you, what matters, then we can help you achieve that goal of being around with your grandchildren for as long as possible, or great-grandchildren, or whatever that is. So more audience participation. Who is this? Anybody know? Light bulb, and his name is? Edison. Exactly. Was he famous for anything else? car, phonograph. He had hundreds of patents. He really created our modern world, didn't he? I mean, by bringing light in, think about that. So I said I was from Florida, but I actually grew up in Ohio. And that's where Edison is from. And I can still remember reading a biography on him in elementary school and how much of an impact that had. And of course, since he was from Ohio, that made it even better. But Edison was ahead of his time in lots of ways. And again, he lived from before the Civil War to right after the Depression started. So that's when he was around. And he had a very famous quote, and it goes like this: "The doctor of the future will give no medicines, but will interest his patient in the care of the human frame, in diet, and the prevention of disease." That's a pretty good goal, isn't it? He was a visionary in more than just the light bulb and more than just the inventions that he did. He saw a future where medicines aren't going to be the answer. And so he's definitely one of my heroes, even though I went to school to learn how to use medicines, and there's a right time for those. But there's a right time for interesting my patients in the care of the human frame. Okay, next question. This is for bonus points, by the way. Anybody recognize this picture? It's worth a whole lot of bonus points, because if anybody gets it, I'll be surprised. His name is Thomas Sydenham. He lived in the 1600s, and he was called the father of English medicine. So he was a visionary 400 years ago and really helped to modernize medicine back in the 1600s. His famous quote is this: "A man is as old as his arteries." As his arteries. Our arteries can age faster or slower than the number of birthdays that you have. Did anybody know that your arteries age differently than you do? Isn't that amazing? And so it turns out that if you do certain things, and we're going to talk about some of those, you can make your arteries age too fast. If you do other things, you can slow down the aging of those arteries. Why is that important? Well, this picture is a diagram of some of the arteries that are in the body. Anybody know what an artery does? Do you recall the purpose of arteries? Blood flow. And why do you need blood flow? Keep your heart alive, keep your brain alive. It carries the oxygen and the nutrients. So without a blood supply, what happens to that part of the body? It dies. And if it's the brain that dies, we call that a stroke. If it's the heart muscle that dies, we call that a heart attack. If it's the kidney, we call that kidney failure. Every organ in the body has an artery. Here's another audience participation. Anybody know how many miles of arteries are in the body? Take a guess. How many miles do you think? Did I hear 1,000?
3,000.
3,000? It's like an auction. Anybody go higher than 3,000? 5,000? I hear 5,000. It's higher than that. 10,000? 20,000? Keep going. 50,000? Keep going.
100,000.
Not too. That's a little too much. 60,000. 60,000 miles of artery. And so I tell my patients that that's a highway that carries the oxygen and the nutrients to your cells. And just like a highway, what happens to highways in the winter around here? They get potholes. And they get so that you can't pass them, right? If you don't take care of the highway, it's going to be impassable. That's what happens or can happen in the 60,000 miles of your artery highway. And so to keep those potholes from forming or to repair the ones that are already there, I've had people during talks say, well, Dr. Wright, is it too late for me to do anything differently? And my answer is always, it's never too late, because our bodies were designed to heal and to repair and to restore if we give it a chance. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I told you a little bit of my story, and really more my professional story, but let me tell you what matters to me. This is a picture of my parents. They've both passed away. But when I was an intern in 1979 at Baptist Hospital, my dad survived his first heart attack at age 52. And I knew enough as an intern to be dangerous, which is why you have to go through that process so you aren't dangerous anymore. But I knew that in 1979, there wasn't a lot we could do for people that had their heart attack. And some of you may remember friends from 30 years ago who died of a heart attack. So I knew his odds weren't good. And in fact, in that day, half of the people died from their heart attack. And of the other half of them were permanently disabled. Well, then I realized, you know what? His dad, so my granddad, had his heart attack at 50, survived it, but was disabled. Never worked again after that at age 50. So I was smart enough as an intern to say, 50, 52, what's my age going to be? Where am I headed? And so I really started paying attention to what causes this and what can I do about it very early on in my life. The other thing that happened to Dad is 5 years later, he got his bypass surgery. I won't ask for a show of hands on that. I won't go there, but I'm sure some of you have had bypass surgery. Yeah. But then a few years after that, he was told he was diabetic. And what we now understand is that those conditions, heart disease, stroke, diabetes, are all caused by the same sorts of things. So today we're going to talk about what do we do to try to stop that from happening. So the other part of my story, so that's Dad. This is one of my sons in this picture and his family. And this son got his degree at University of Memphis in exercise science. And so he understands exercise way better than I do. He takes great care of himself. At age 34, he came up to me and said, you know, Dad, you're doing all of these tests on your patients to help them not have heart disease. And I know about our family history, so should I do the tests? Well, yeah, Paul, you ought to do that. At age 34, we did a test to see how old his arteries were. And at 34, he looks the picture of health on the outside. His arteries were 57 years old.
How can you tell the age of your arteries? Huh?
That's a great question. How can we tell the age of an artery? There's a special test called an ultrasound that can actually take a picture. And if you get the right ultrasound and do the right measurements on it, it can tell you how old your arteries are. And just as all of you gasped a little bit when I said how old his arteries were, he did too. And when he told his wife, she was pretty upset. And I told him, I said, well, Paul, you know, probably my dad's arteries were that age at 34 too, which is why he had his heart attack at 52. And then I had to say, and the problem, Paul, is you picked the wrong parents. Because heart disease runs in my family, there's some heart disease in my wife's family. So then he said, so what do we do about it? The good news is we did some other tests, found out some of the do's and don'ts that he needed, and over a period of about 18 months, he actually reversed that aging process and lost more than a decade off of the aging of his arteries. So as I said earlier, our bodies are meant to heal. They're meant to recuperate if we give them a chance. One of the challenges is there's a lot of information out there, isn't there? Coffee's good one day, it's not good the next day. Artificial sweeteners are great. No, now it's sugar. What do I believe? What do I listen to? And then, is there one right answer for everybody? And the truth is there isn't, because we are all fearfully and wonderfully made, and we are all unique. But there are some principles that we can share. So those are my whys. Those are the big reasons, my family, and some of the health issues that they've had, and the 11 grandchildren that are here, 2 that are up in Michigan, that I want to be around for. So let's talk a little bit more about this damage that can happen to the arteries. This is a person in a kayak. What sort of risks is this person taking by being out in the kayak in the ocean? What are some risks that you all see?
Drowning?
He could drown. Absolutely. He's by himself too.
Sharks.
Shh. Okay, you can't see the sharks, but there could be sharks there. What can you see that's a risk in the picture?
He's by himself.
He's by himself, gets into trouble. He really doesn't have any options. How about sunlight on his skin? What's that going to do? Yeah, sunburn, melanoma, skin cancers, all sorts of things. So this person is taking some risks, some of which are obvious. And somebody stole my thunder because some of the risks aren't obvious. Sometimes there is a shark tailing you. And from a health perspective, what we want to know is, do we have any sharks that are chasing us? And what can I do about it? So let's talk about the causes, what actually causes people to die. Not diseases. So yes, heart attacks can kill people, strokes can kill people, but what actually caused that? What are some of your ideas on what causes people?
Food.
Oh, who said that? You win the star. That's absolutely right. Food.
Oh.
Food. In fact, this study was published a few years ago on the United States causes of death. The number one cause of death is what we eat. What we eat. What else do you think?
Salt. Inactivity.
Love it. Who said that? Gold star there. That turned out to be the 5th most common reason.
Smoking.
Smoking was number 2. Isn't that amazing? Food is more dangerous than tobacco. Now, I've kind of twisted those facts a little bit, because if you do smoke, it really does raise your risk of dying. But for a population, because only about 20% of the people smoke, but 100% of us eat, there's a whole lot more of us that are eating than smoking. So that's why it's more dangerous. So our forks are the number one contributor to death. And our furniture is number 5, not being active. Is that an amazing thing? Isn't that amazing? Our forks and our furniture really are killing us. I wish somebody had told me that a long time ago. So here's a question for you. What's on your fork? Tell me, think back over the last day. What are some things that you've chosen to eat? Cheese? Sweets? Candy? Coffee? Potatoes?
Fried chicken.
Fried chicken? Desserts? You know, Delicious foods, right?
Hot dogs.
Hot dogs. Excellent. Fried foods. Lots of choices out there, aren't there? Well, I've just said our forks are killing us, so are there some choices that we can make that are different? We've got 2 forks here. Can you tell? I tried to blow this up enough that everybody could see it. What's on the fork on your left? Pizza. So we've got cheese and processed meat and starchy crust, and then some tomato sauce that probably has sugar added. You know, they add sugar to lots of things. What's on the right-hand fork? Broccoli. Yeah. What's one of the main differences between those 2 forks?
Green.
So the color for sure, the green color,
Carbohydrate.
that's part of it.
One of them's edible, the other one's not.
See, I thought you were going to say one of them tastes good and one of them doesn't. You know, which one of those came to your table the way it was made? Yeah. This is the way God makes food, right? This is the way people make food. That's a clue, okay? That's a little bit of a clue, is if it comes, the closer it is to the way it was formed, the way it was made, the way it was created, the more likely it is to be healthy. So has anybody heard of the Mediterranean diet? Show of hands, who knows about that? Great, awesome. What are some characteristics of a Mediterranean diet? Fruits, vegetables, red wine, fish. You guys are doing great. Anything else? Nuts?
Nothing fried.
Nothing fried. Yeah, so the fish can't be fried catfish, right? Hate to tell you that. How about seeds? Olive oil? Yeah. Fruits? Yeah, fruits and vegetables. And when you eat grain, it needs to be whole grain. I just learned this in the last few weeks. Did you know that wheat bread is not made with whole wheat? It's really white bread and they've just colored it. Isn't that crazy? Now, if it says whole wheat bread, you're okay. But if it just says wheat bread, it's white bread that they colored brown. I know this picture, I wasn't sure how well this was going to show up, but at the very top of this are the meats. And fish and a little bit of red meat is okay. And then the poultry and eggs and butter are here. Here are the fish. And then down here, look how big this part of the pyramid is. All those fruits and vegetables and seeds and healthy fats. Eat the rainbow. That's a simple way. As you're deciding what foods, if it's colorful, it's probably a good choice. If it's the way God made it in the first place, it's probably a good choice.
That's what I tell them in the restaurant. Make it pretty. Tomato or something to make it pretty.
Yeah. Did you know you're allowed to ask your waiter or waitress to substitute out things on the menu? You're allowed to do that. My wife does it all the time. If they have potatoes on there, could you bring me broccoli instead? The
They
neat.
have rice and potatoes and macaroni. Yeah.
You're right.
Don't do that.
Don't do that to me. Of course, the forces conspire against us, don't they? Those starchy foods tend to be less expensive. So restaurants especially are trying to make a profit, not being harsh towards restaurants, but they've got to make a living, and so they cook food that people enjoy eating, even if it's not good for you. But who thought, and I meant to ask this question before I showed this slide, but I'll ask it anyway. Who thought that healthy eating was boring? be honest. How many people, when you hear the words healthy eating, you think that's boring? Yeah, thank you for being honest, because I used to think that too. But when you look at this, I mean, this is a typical Mediterranean diet spread. Wow, there are lots of choices. Lots of choices. Here's another healthy Mediterranean type of food. So it's a kebab, but it's got some chicken and some wonderful veggies on it. And then here's a seafood plate. So the shrimp does have cholesterol in it, but it turns out that seafood cholesterol is really not bad for you. So don't be afraid of the seafood. Just don't fry it. So any questions about food before I move on to the next one? Or any thoughts? Great. So another audience question. Where do you spend your time? Think about the last day or two. Where do you spend most of your time?
Work.
Work?
Sleep.
Sleep?
Sleep.
Sleep? Cleaning house.
Watching TV.
Watching TV.
Exercise.
Exercise. Socializing? Socializing, yeah. Lots of ways that we can spend our time. What I can tell you is that 3 of us in this room are actually getting healthier by the minute, and the other 50 of us are getting sicker by the minute. Because I'm standing, exactly. Isn't that amazing? Just standing is healthier than sitting, which is why our furniture is killing us. Here, my son that was the exercise science, or is an exercise science major, taught me this, that if you sit for 6 hours a day, which most of us do, that has the same health risk as smoking a pack of cigarettes every day. Oh my goodness. You didn't know you were smokers, did you? So our furniture absolutely is part of the problem. And yet they make, I mean, these are wonderful chairs in these, especially these first few rows. And it's not that you can never sit in the chair, but guess what? If you simply get out of your chair for 3 minutes out of every hour, it undoes all the bad things that chair did you the other 57 minutes. Who here thinks that they could do that? Get out of their chair for 3 minutes every hour? Awesome. Yeah, you could, yeah. And now that you know it's important, it might be something to consider. Because spending more time, having more quality of life, staying out of the hospital, all tie back to keeping that artery, those highways, that 60,000 miles healthy, and giving it a chance to repair itself. Deb and I were talking just briefly beforehand about, and I forget the gentleman's name, but is it Harvey? Hardy. Hardy is very interested in anti-inflammatory foods and anti-inflammatory diet. That's what we're talking about. So inflammation actually makes your body get sick. And certain foods either make you more likely or less likely to have that happen. So what words come to mind when you see this word? Exercise. Sweat. Dirty. Work. Tired. Oh, do you have a better word? Well, what's a better word?
It makes you feel better.
It makes you feel better. Boring, I heard boring, but it makes you feel better. Isn't it amazing how we do view exercise in general as something that we'd rather not do, right? I mean, there are some exercise folks in here because Deb pointed out some folks that are really ballroom and in the gym and doing things. So there are some of us, not just in this room, but throughout the country, a small percentage of people do intentionally exercise. But we do think of it like you've got to run to get any benefit, or you got to be almost exhausted for it to count, or you got to really go out there and pump some iron and lift some weights, and that's what you got to do to stay healthy. Well, the magic is that any movement is medicine. Movement is healing. And it is fun. It can be fun. So what are some opportunities for that? Well, right here I've learned about your BFIT classes. How many of you all use the BFIT class? Couple? Okay. So that's an opportunity here. How many of you get down to the pool and do some of the AQUA classes? Awesome. And something I learned, my wife was a water aerobics instructor for many years, but she was limited by some of the things she could do because they kept the pool too cold. And I've learned that your pool is at 92, is that right, Deb? Which is the perfect, 92 degrees in the pool is perfect for doing the sorts of movement that's beneficial for you. Ballroom dancing class just let out, I understand. How many of you all do the ballroom dancing? I already have a date with, and I've forgotten your name, I'm sorry. She and I, Alice, she and I talked about ballroom dancing, and so we're going to try to have a dance at some point. But all of those are opportunities for movement, and not everybody can do some of those things. I mean, I've got 2 left feet, so I'm challenged that way. But I mentioned this before. This is really a simple thing to do, is simply get up and move for 3 minutes out of every hour. That's all it takes. So if you've got a program that you're watching, commercials come around about every 11 minutes or so, something like that. Yeah, and some of them a whole lot sooner than that. But simply stand during the commercial, or get up and walk across the room. Just think of ways that you can be moving. Fight your furniture, fight your forks. So here's some take-home points. Number 1, enjoy colorful foods. Eat that rainbow, and eat the rainbow the way God made it in the first place. And then try to move every hour. Just get out of your furniture if you're able to, and just stand, and you'll have benefit. As you can tell, I like famous people and their quotes because they're full of wisdom. And we've talked about Edison, and then Thomas Sydenham, and now Abraham Lincoln. And he said, and in the end, it's not the years in your life that count. It's the life in your years. And we started this conversation with what matters to you. And I hope that during this time, number 1, you've thought about what does matter to you. And I hope that you've seen some ways that you can really take charge of some of the most important decisions that you make every single day that can help you to continue to enjoy the people that matter most for as long as possible. So that's my presentation. I wanted to leave time for questions, so please, anybody that has a question from the back of the room.
Is the health of your arteries the same throughout your body?
Ooh, I love that question. She asked, is the health of your arteries the same throughout your body? Great question, because the answer is no. So different parts of the artery system do age faster than others. And that's why both heart attacks and strokes are so much more common than things like kidney failure. So the kidneys tend to not get damaged as easily, but the heart and the brain do. So absolutely. And so one way to test that is we can measure different arteries and see what's going on inside of that artery. Great question. Any other questions?
If a patient came to you and wanted to get their arteries measured, where would you start?
Another great question. Which artery do you pick to measure first? So the way we decide that is we want it to be easy, and we want it to be safe, and we want it to be inexpensive. And the easiest way to do that is with an ultrasound on the arteries in the neck. These are called the carotid arteries. And that gives a pretty good, it's about 90% predictive of what's going on in the rest of the body. So a carotid artery ultrasound. And let me give you one nuance to that. So the standard tests that we doctors do are mainly designed to find, is the artery, is the highway impassable or not? Rather than, are there any potholes that might make it impassable? So a traditional run-of-the-mill ultrasound really is looking for, is the highway passable or not? It's the same instrument, but a slightly different picture is taken to look for potholes, which is the age of the artery. Yes?
If you are diabetic, what arteries do you have to keep watch with?
So for diabetics, which are the most important arteries to keep an eye on? Another great question. Couple of facts, and I'm sure there are some diabetics in the audience, so I don't say this to frighten you, but more just to give you more information. We know that 90% of people that become diabetic will have at least one heart attack or one stroke in their lifetime. That's pretty incredible. Which is why preventing diabetes and if once you get it, controlling it are so important. So the two biggest arteries are the ones to the brain and the ones to the heart. But they're not the only ones, because diabetes can also damage the little itty bitty ones. The ones in the eye, and that's why many diabetics can have blindness. The ones to the kidney, and so it's not the big arteries, but the little tiny arteries, so kidney failure. And then the arteries into the legs. The most common reason for an amputation is not from an injury, it's from diabetes. Yeah. So the arteries that you need to worry about as a diabetic are really all of them, because diabetes damages, it's an equal opportunity damager, pretty much can go after any of those arteries.
How do you feel about things like fluoride in your water in relationship to your arteries?
I don't have any bad information on that. I'd be interested if you've read something, but I've not read anything that tells me that that's a bad thing.
What do you think of turmeric?
Turmeric, oh, that's a great question too. So turmeric is a spice, and there's a lot of really interesting evidence coming out for the benefit. The challenge from my perspective as a scientist and trying to make recommendations is spices and supplements of that nature. It's hard to know how much is in each manufacturer's concoction, and so it's hard to study, and if turmeric is good, did I pick the right one that got me enough of the good stuff? So with that as a caveat, I'll say that there's a lot of good evidence that turmeric is anti-inflammatory and can help to promote better health in the body. But let me share one other thing, because supplements might be a common question. One thing that I teach doctors, so one of the hats I wear is to train other doctors how to help their patients learn how to be healthy. And I teach doctors, you cannot outprescribe a person's choices. Now, that may sound a little confusing, so let me unpack it. I always thought that if I just gave my patients the right medicine, I could fix all of their problems. Well, that doesn't fix what they're eating, doesn't fix whether they're moving, it doesn't fix if they're not getting enough sleep, which is another important thing. So lifestyle choices are still more important than specific supplements, or in some cases than medicines. Again, there is a right place for medicines. Turmeric, I think if you get a reliable product, probably has some health benefit, but don't let whatever supplement you might be taking mislead you into thinking that food choices and movement choices aren't still really important. Yes?
The thing that bothers me is all of us, when we reach about 50, we start thinking about this. I wish doctors, and maybe they are now, starting earlier with children. I think very many allergies are food related in children, and I hear so little of that.
You're exactly right. It's an inside secret about the medical profession is that it developed out of a need to take care of disease. So the healthcare system is really a disease care system. And we thought, and so thinking back to Edison's time, he kind of saw the light bulb, pun intended. He said, you know what, medicines are really not the answer. But back in his latter days, antibiotics were starting to be discovered, and we really thought, as medical doctors, that medicines were the answer to all the diseases. Well, it turns out, to your point, that we cause most of our diseases, and it starts in childhood. Pediatricians are, thankfully, starting to take the lead in that. They got it sooner than us adult doctors did. That, gosh, I really need to teach my moms how to raise their kids in terms of their health so that they'll have healthy lives. So that, I love your question. And the pediatricians are getting it. I'm trying to attack the adult medicine side of it and get more adult doctors to understand that as well.
What supplements do you recommend?
What supplements do I recommend? So here's my short list. It's fairly short. And the list is mainly centered on preventing heart attack, stroke, and diabetes. So cinnamon is great. Cinnamon.
Any kind of cinnamon?
So it's hard to eat. First of all, it's hard to eat enough cinnamon. Even if you like it, it's hard to just eat enough of it. So you do need to buy a supplement. And the cassia cinnamon, and you need 2 grams a day or 2,000 milligrams. Cassia cinnamon, CASSIA. Another good supplement is vitamin D. Vitamin D. So the how much depends on the person. So it's hard for me to give a blanket recommendation. Most people are fine if they take up to 1,000 a day, but there are some reasons to not take that much. So just definitely discuss all of these with your own doctor before you do it.
Don't you get an awful lot? I'm into my cottage cheese and my yogurt and not the flavored yogurt, but the
Like Greek yogurt?
Greek
Yeah.
yogurt.
Uh-huh.
Don't you get a lot of your D from that?
You do, yes. So dairy products are vitamin D fortified, so that does help. Sunlight is good.
You take it with K2?
You can. The evidence on that is still out in terms of does that really improve the benefit of adding vitamin K2 to vitamin D, whether or not that really makes it better. In some patients it probably does. Some people have a hard time converting their vitamin D from an inactive to an active form, but most people probably don't need the K2.
What about D3?
B3 can be very,
D3.
oh, D3. Yeah, so it's a little more expensive. I'm sorry, D2 is more expensive. The over-the-counter D3 is the best D to get. A fiber supplement is another supplement. So the psyllium, Psyllium, like a Metamucil type of product. Fiber is a great supplement for this. Get the sugar-free. Regular Metamucil has a lot of sugar in it.
How many grams?
So you want to get 30 grams a day, work up to a total of 30 grams a day of fiber and split the doses throughout the day. So you can take a dose of fiber with each meal. I'm trying to think if I left out a supplement. Fish oil can be very beneficial. It's hard to eat enough fish to get enough of the fish oil, so that's a good supplement as well.
You never said anything about the benefits of chocolate.
Oh, you asked me too, didn't you? I didn't have it on one of my slides, but yeah, so she asked me coming in, I hope that you say something good about chocolate. And I told her, that's absolutely one of my favorites for health. Now, it does need to be dark chocolate, and it's got to be at least 70% dark. So the darker it is, the less sugar is in it. And that's really the main reason. But dark chocolate, in fact, we recommend to our patients to get a little square about, yay big, every day. Think of it as medicine, but enjoy it as a dessert. Thank you for reminding me of the chocolate.
What about vitamin C?
Vitamin C, that's a good question too. As far as we know, it might help reduce viral infections at really high doses. So during flu season and some of those respiratory outbreaks that come out, if you're getting fruits and vegetables, you'll get enough vitamin C. So that's another benefit of eating the rainbow. So as many of these healthy vitamins that you can get in your diet, the better.
How do you feel about your black pepper with your turmeric?
Black pepper and turmeric, I don't know.
It's a booster.
Okay. I'll have to look into that.
Stop asking.
No. I learn as much from my audience as I hope they learn from me. So I'll look into that. I love black pepper, so.
Supposedly you're supposed to take it together.
Okay. I've really enjoyed today. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the great questions. Eat the rainbow and get out of your chair every hour. Thank you all.